Hello everybody, Julia here from Just One More Card with a guest post for Whimsy stamps, and today I want to show you another Copic coloring video from start to finish, since you said you enjoyed the other one where I colored a rubber stamp from Whimsy stamps. So I'm going to be using the Birthday Beauty stamp, these edge dies, and some Copic friendly paper, in my case Simon Says Stamp Heavy Cardstock. Now this is a rubber stamp, and I want to make sure that I could, if necessary, double stamp it into the same position. So I am using my Misty here to stamp it, and the piece from my Stamp-A-Magic, and it worked out actually quite fine. And I did stamp it twice into the same position just to make sure that I got the lines very nice and dark. Now the Copic coloring that I'm doing is like for the skin, I'm using the same skin colors most of the time, which is E11, E21, E04, E00, and E000. They'll be listed in the video description below and on my blog. And I can only repeat that all my coloring skills, as good or as bad as they are, because I'm still learning, like all of you, come from taking classes at Kit and Clowder, which I can really recommend. Because I don't know, like everything that I've learned about Copic coloring, I learned from them, and I'm still learning, I'm still improving my skills, but at least I have an understanding of what I'm doing and why I'm doing something and why something isn't working. Yeah. So what I like to do is I like to start with my first layer of Copic coloring. I usually do 2 layers most of the time. And here I started with my darkest color, which was E04, and I just put a little bit of that color into the areas where I think the shadows will be. You can always add more if you want to darken up the image, but you can't really take any away. So be rather careful with that. And then I'm just going through my progression. From the E04 I went to the E11, and then this is the E21, and I'm just adding tiny bits of color directly on the edge of the previous color. That's all I'm doing. And this allows me to get a really nice blend towards my lightest color. This is now, we had E04, E11, E21. So this is E00, and then I'll come back with E000 and go over everything. And this will smooth everything out quite nicely. And as you can see, it will also lighten the darkest color quite a bit. It's not even as obvious here as it is in real life. But in real life, the dark color really got quite light. So I'm coming back in with my second layer. And the second layer basically means exactly what it says. It's adding the same colors again. And now if you would think that you needed to add more darker color because you now have a better feeling of how much space you have, you could do that here. You do not have to add darker color into areas where you feel that they wouldn't work as nicely. And what I try to do now is to only add the color at the very edge of the previous color. So I try not to go over the entire previous color, because if you go over a darker Copic color with a lighter Copic color, you will mute the dark color. You will make it lighter. It's just the nature of alcohol markers. And that's why I try to only add colors to the edges of the previous color and not go over the previous one on this second layer. This will leave the darker colors darker, but since the paper is already a little bit moist from the previous layer, the color will blend more easily now than it would have done before. And you can see that I was actually able to get quite a nice skin tone, and I'm just adding some rose colors here into the cheeks to make it look nicer. Now I am going back to the first layer, which is for the dress. I'm adding actually a tiny bit of shading here with my lightest, which is BG11. It's the lightest color I'll be using. And I'm using my lightest color because if I mess up, that's not the problem. I can always go over it with my darkest color. And I'm just mapping in the shadows. So I'm trying to figure out where in these folds will the shadows go. And again, if you have no clue where shadows go and how to do shadows on a dress, it's not a problem, because I didn't know that either 2 years ago. I had no clue how people were able to do that. And once more, I can only say I took the cloth coloring class from Kit and Clowder, and that it was like, oh my goodness, that's how you have to do it. It was completely easy once you saw Elise do it and explain it, and she's absolutely fantastic at explaining that. then it suddenly became clear where everything needed to go. And since then, I enjoy coloring images like this. It's still a challenge because you have to figure this out at first. But once you have it figured out, it's just fun because you know what to do and you can bring an image to life. You can see here that I'm adding shadows under the first layer of her dress, so that the layer beneath would have a cast shadow. That means whatever is on top casts a shadow on what is on the bottom. I'm just adding this in roughly here. This is not even my darkest BG color. This is my second darkest BG color. I already know that I will do 2 layers of color here, and I will come in with my darkest color on the second layer only. Now that I have a pretty good idea how far my shadows will extend, I am coming in with the next lighter color, and I'm just extending this a bit here, just trying to make sure that this looks natural and just blending this out. I personally find that for doing folds in dresses, it is quite helpful to have colors which are in progression, like BG, like the dark, like all the BG in the 70s, or let's say, I don't know, like you have to learn about Copic colors, and you don't always need the same color family, but you just need colors that work well together. You need at least 3 to get folds to look right. Like I would advise you to have at least 3. It's difficult to do with 2. If you have more than 3, it's even easier, and you need to be able to go to a very light color. My lightest one will be BG11. I think what I'm using right here is BG23. As always, I'll be listing all the colors and supplies used in the video description below. Because to go back to the colors, like if you have a very light color as your last color, like the BG11 for example, it's much easier to either blend to white or to have the illusion that you have a very, very light highlight. If you have a very dark color to start with and then go to a very light color, you can create the illusion of dimension, that something is rounded or has shadow and texture. So it really helps to have multiple colors. Now this is my second layer, and now I'm coming in with my very darkest BG here. And I'm not going to add a lot of it. I'm just going to add it in the very darkest areas here. And here, for example, on this fold, I knew that I needed to extend the shadows, so I was a little more generous there. And here, where I don't have that much space, I'm not adding too much of the color. And I find sometimes I find it easier to flick away from me, so I turn my entire project around because that allows me to have more control over what I'm doing. And you can see that I still have areas that are white that I haven't colored in at all yet, and that is also completely okay. Since I knew I would do 2 layers, leaving some areas white gives me still room to work with, because I like to have my highlights to be like really bright, and I feel that even if I go over the highlight areas twice with my lightest color, I find them too dark. But that's my personal taste. That's why I don't like to color everything in with the lightest color first. It doesn't work for me. And now I'm just going through my progression from the very darkest color towards the very lightest, and I'm only adding the lighter colors at the edge of the darker color or of the previous color. This way my darker color will stay dark in the very shadow areas, and I can blend my way towards the lightest color. I know it looks like a mess, just wait until I'm done. So this is the second lightest color, blending this out here, and I'm still leaving space for my highlight here. And now I'm coloring over. This might even be my lightest color, I'm not even sure anymore. Anyhow, you can see the progression here. And here in the darker areas, it's okay because that will naturally be darker, so I'm not all that worried about the detail there. But you can see how nice the folds look on the rest of her dress, and I'm going over everything to smooth it out. Now for the finishing touches, after I was done with the coloring. Or actually, I'm not done with the coloring yet. I'm sorry that I didn't show you how to do the hair. I had accidentally gone off screen, like you couldn't really see what I was doing, so I apologize for that. But here on the balloon, you can see that I'm using different oranges and yellows, and I'm blending from dark to light again, going over the edges of the previous color with the lighter color to make sure I get a nice blend. And I'm repeating this. So I can see here I'm coming in, and I'm actually even leaving a tiny highlight to the left. And that will help me to create even more dimension. I've seen some Copic colorists do that, like especially Sandy Alnock's doing that. And I like the effect that you get. It's not as pronounced here as I would have wanted because I didn't do it right. But you can see here that I'm leaving some space to the left to fill in with a lighter color later on. And I'm just using my progression here from dark to light again. And now I'm coloring in that edge here, exactly. And I went a little bit outside of the line, but hey, it's okay. It's a handmade card. If you want a perfect card, you have to buy one that, like from the store. But if this is a handmade card, so I feel that's completely okay if it's not entirely perfect. And again, this is my second layer. You saw that I left some space for the highlight, which I'm then filling in with my lightest color. And now I have balloons, which really look nicely. Now I'm putting everything together, for reals. So I'm adding some ATG adhesive to my card base. I think that is my card base. Oh yeah, and I'm adding a strip of pattern paper at the top and at the bottom because I want that pattern paper to frame my colored panel. And you will see how that looks like in a moment. This is pattern paper from My Favorite Things, and I like these simple patterns because they don't take away from the overall design. I used the edge die on this panel to create this nice edge here, as you can see, and I added it with foam tape on top of my pattern paper. I'm using my white gel pen to add a faux highlight to the balloon. I like to do that afterwards because I usually forget it at the very beginning. So, and you can still kind of create the illusion of the highlight here. And that is the card actually. So the main focus was on the coloration, as you can see here. And I wanted to keep the rest of the card quite simple. You can still stamp a sentiment on the inside of the card, but I didn't want to distract from the outside. The only other thing that I did is, so in the end, I did add a sentiment at the front, and I added some dots with my Stardust gel pen around the sentiment, and I added some dots with the white gel pen on her dress just for some additional highlights, but otherwise I left it clean and simple. I hope this gave you some nice tips and tricks for your own coloration. If you enjoyed this, check out the other videos that I have here for you. The one on the left is another stamp by Whimsy Stamps showing off a Copic coloration from start to finish. And on the right, I have different coloration techniques, two with Copic markers and one with chalk pastels. Thanks for watching. If you liked my video, please leave me a thumbs up or subscribe, and I'll catch you again soon. Bye bye.